Welcome, everyone, to the House Education Administration Committee. We appreciate everyone being here. Thank you so very, very much. As we get started, we always start with calling the roll. And before I have the clerks call the roll, we have two permanent members in here now for our clerk's office, Gabby Hamada, Gabby, and Michaela Andrews. Thank you all for all you do to keep us organized. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, will y'all call the roll?
Representatives Baum, Bolso, Butler, Sapicki, Fritz, Gant, Gillespie, Haston, Hurt, Lafferty, Love, McKenzie, Parkinson, Reagan, Ritchie, Stevens, Warner, Vice Chairman Slater, Chairman White. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Welcome, committee. We have a presentation today, which we're going to take up first. It's a very important one that's doing great work in our state, and then we will get to our bills. But before we begin, we always like to begin this committee with a word of prayer to ask for guidance and wisdom in the decisions that we make. May we bow. Holy Father, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to live during this time that we can work on issues that protect and work for our children. Give us wisdom, discernment, and help us as a body. May your spirit be over us this day and help us as a people to work together to find the best answers for the education of our children, for the protection of our children and our schools. Through Christ name we pray. Amen. Okay, we're going to start out, members. Anybody have an introduction, a comment, or anything? Yes, Representative Ritchie. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Members and everybody here, just wanted to send out thoughts and prayers. Deputy McGowan, who was shot and killed there in my district this past Thursday, they're having his funeral procession right now. And I was going to go down there for that, but I felt the best way to honor him, it was to be here doing the will and the work of the people. But if y'all can just keep his thoughts and prayers, keep him and his family in y'all's thoughts and prayers. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ritchie. Very much appreciate that. My wife is from Blount County, so that's a beautiful area of the state. So thank you for that. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but the Democrats up here back me down, so I won't say anything. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Representative Baum.
Thank you, Chairman White. I just wanted to acknowledge and recognize and welcome a Rutherford County School Board member. Frances Rosales is here with us today, and we want to make her welcome. Thank you for being here.
Anyone else? Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to recognize Mr. Bob Eby, the president of the State School Board, who's here with us. Please stand, sir.
Thank you for your presence. Anyone else, members? Recognition? Seeing none? Okay. Well, members, we're going to jump right in. I want to start today with our presentation, about 15 minutes. This is by Tennessee Achieves. We got Dr. Chrissy Delejandro and Graham Thomas. Would y'all make your way to the front? And they will explain, if you don't know, Tennessee Achieves, what is the organization that helps make our Tennessee Promise students effective. So with no further ado, identify yourself, and then we were going out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Chrissy Delejandro. For the last 16 years, I've had the privilege of leading the Tennessee Achieves work, starting when we were a small, scrappy nonprofit in Knox County with 493 students to a record year of Tennessee Promise students this year with over 66,000 students applying. So excited to jump in with you today. We've been here before, so probably not much of this is new, but we love to come and give an update to you considering the generous funding that this body has continued to support for the work that we do. But really, we think about the work in three buckets. Students first always. We're always thinking about what's in the best interest of students. We also think about community building and how we can serve communities in terms of nurturing and fostering economic mobility. And then finally, we measure. We are very much rooted in this idea of accountability. As I said, when we started in Knox County back in 2008, 493 students entered our program that year. Now we serve 90% of the state's high school seniors through the Tennessee Promise Partnership with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. We also serve 93% of Tennessee Promise applicants. And I think most importantly, we serve 88% of our state's community college graduates under that first-time full-time umbrella. Big numbers being served at Tennessee Achieves. I think one thing, one of many things that the team does well is really think about this work at scale. We have an internal mantra of meeting each student where they are at scale. And you can see here, big numbers, almost 650,000 students served over the last 16 years in partnership with countless school counselors and our friends at the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of FAFSAs have been completed. And then you can also see there about 150,000 students have enrolled with the Tennessee Promise. Game-changing numbers. If you remember when this body passed the Tennessee Promise overwhelmingly, we saw a 4.6% increase in our state's college going rate. That one-time increase represented more than the 7 years combined, and we can see that that is continuing to work here. A decade of Tennessee Promise. We are 10 years into that program. You can see there at the bottom that small number, and as we continue to grow, and then the huge jump in 2015 when this body passed the Tennessee Promise legislation, the first in the country. I will say that we continue to be the gold standard. Graham and I were just in Dallas last week, and states and communities continue to look at us on how they operate Promise programs and, quite frankly, college success programs in general. One of the things that I think is so incredibly important is not only to look at if we're getting students there, but ensuring that once they land at their post-secondary institutions, that the funds that we are investing in these students are actually working. You can see here our students are 89% more likely to retain, 157% more likely to graduate in 3 years, and 109% more likely to graduate in 6 years. There's a lot of that students are required to attend full time, and that's a they are committed to not only mostly working full time, but they are taking their academics also very seriously. We also have volunteer mentors that work with our students. We have coaches that are working with our most vulnerable student populations. And as you can see, the magic equation is working. We also think about students like me who were the first in their families to go to college. Oftentimes, those students are the first to exit the post-secondary pipeline. You can see here our first-generation students, for example, are 385% more likely to graduate than their peers without the support of Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise. One thing that also keeps us up at night is our state's most vulnerable students. I will tell you that no matter how you slice the data, the lower the household income, the less likely you are to not only attend post-secondary, but earn a college credential. And you can see here our Pell eligible students are 357% more likely to earn a college credential. FAFSA is top of mind for everyone right now. This federal gateway to aid has a lot of challenges this year, challenges that we're working with partners across the state. But last year, Tennessee continuing to lead the country with an 86% FAFSA completion rate. And one thing that we're really proud of, I will say that oftentimes Randy, our board chair, Randy Boyd, says he takes credit for none of this outside of the community service idea. But this July, we'll pass 5 million hours given back by our students. It's a huge milestone. I should tell you that we asked the students when they submit their community service if they enjoyed it, and 96% of them tell us that they did, in fact, enjoy their community service. This body also helps us fund something called Summer Bridge and Summer Institute. What we learned very early in our Knox Achieves days is that students who are at risk in terms of their academic preparedness oftentimes leave the post-secondary pipeline their first semester of college. So we've partnered with our state's 13 community colleges to host really summer boot camps for our students. The students are on a college campus with Summer Bridge for 3 weeks, 6 weeks with Summer Institute at Southwest Community College in Memphis. And we're seeing some really game-changing results. 87% success rate with students either testing out of remediation or dramatically increasing their test scores. And that's a 96% rate with Summer Institute. I will tell you the challenge with both of these is convincing 17 and 18-year-olds to give up their summer to be a part of this. But when we can, we know it makes a real difference. You can see here the impact of our summer programs. Those students who participate are 83% more likely to graduate than their peers who are starting at our community colleges requiring remediation. One thing that we're incredibly proud of is something that we built several years ago called Complete. This serves our state's most vulnerable students, our economically disadvantaged students. About 10,000 students served under this Complete umbrella every year. We bring in coaches embedded at our state's community colleges to work proactively with our students. And what I mean by that is we're not waiting on students to come to us to tell us that they're struggling. We're actually working with the students proactively to get them to and through post-secondary. You can see here, 45% of those students are more likely to be the first in their family to go to college, and 270% are Pell eligible. We couple this Complete coach with something called Complete Grants. Representative Sapicki was the first to jump on board with this with some seed money several years ago. And what we now know is the governor's office providing us with pilot funding of $14.5 million over 5 years has been game changing. Our students are hungry. Our students can't afford their books. Our students are writing their papers on their phones, which does not lead to academic success. And now we are able to grant these students in $1,000 per semester increments, things like TCAT tools, their books, their computers. We're also addressing those age-old problems like transportation challenges, which are pervasive across the state, but specifically in our rural communities, transportation continues to be a very real challenge. So for us, it's a magic equation. Have a coach, someone in your corner embedded at the college waiting on you, wanting you to be successful and ensuring you have the resource to do so, plus this access to what many call emergency aid equals 183% more likely to graduate. These numbers are being externally verified by the University of Tennessee's Center for Business and Economic Research. We're studying this in hopes of sustaining this funding going forward. For us, it's always about students. The numbers are incredibly important. And as I said, when we kicked off, we are very much rooted in accountability. But you can see here a TCAT Chattanooga student talking about the importance of the Complete grant and how that's been a game changer for her. We also are running 2 pilots that I thought that we would share with you. One is a transfer pilot. So interesting fact, when students submit their community service in July, we ask them if they have intentions of transferring from their community college to a 4-year institution. Every year, about between 65 and 70% of students tell us, yes, they have intentions of transferring, but only 24% do. So we are running a transfer pilot to increase the percentage of students who are transferring from a community college to a 4-year institution and seeing some really great promising initial results. We also last year created a college going goal in Knox County, 70 by 2024. The idea was to bring the community together to infuse students back into the post-secondary pipeline and create a big tent around the word college. Oftentimes when you talk about our TCATs, many people are like, that's not college. Absolutely it is. And so for us, it's about what can we do to contribute. And so we created a program called Knox Access, where we have embedded coaches into Knox County high schools in an effort to reach that 70% goal. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about our volunteer mentoring program. It really is the heart of what we do, cultivating in our communities champions, not only for our students, but for this incredibly important work. And you can see here, 90,000 plus volunteers have been recruited and have been working with our students over the last 16 years. Many student stories to tell when you have 633,000 students who come through your program. And we ask them all the time to share with us their success, and they're doing that, and we're incredibly proud of them. That's the end, Chairman, of my formal presentation, but I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Dr. D'Alejandro. Questions of our guests while we're on this? Thank you so much. Tennessee Promise, we spend so much money in the state. Like you say, 633 students applied. This came about, correct me if I'm wrong, going back in memory, under Governor Haslam, Tennessee Promise, but yet, you can get a child into college, but can you keep them there? And so this is what Tennessee Achieves does, as well as our other foundations, such as the Ayers Foundation does. Members, anybody have a question of Representative Sapicki, Chairman Sapicki?
Thank you, Chrissy, for coming here today. The data is always very wonderful. On slide 6,
Okay.
should be the one on student outcomes.
I'm getting there as fast as it'll let me. This one?
Yes, that one there.
Uh-huh.
So we hear testimony from our four-year colleges and institutions. We hear testimony from our community colleges. We all know the cost of education is skyrocketing across all parts of education. The thing that continuously asks the question why. Bachelor's degrees are notoriously 4 years.
Mhm.
Associate's degrees are supposed to be 2 years.
Yes.
But we chart our data in our community colleges and our TCATs based off a 3-year grad rate, and we chart our graduation rate in our 4-year institutions off of 6 years, which drives the cost of education up even more. Do you have data that shows students that enroll in Tennessee Achieves, what's their graduation rate versus students that don't enroll? What's their graduation? That's the first question.
Yes, that is actually what you're looking at now. So that 157% more likely to graduate, that 36% is our 3-year graduation rate, and that 14% would be students who, for whatever reason, enrolled directly following high school, but not with the Tennessee Promise program.
You recognize, Chairman?
Will you say that one more time?
Absolutely. So that 36% number, if we're just following that 3-year grad rate, that is the Tennessee Achieves 3-year grad rate. That 14% would be students who, for whatever reason, enrolled in a community or technical college directly following high school, but without Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise.
You recognize?
And do you have that data for the 6-year colleges? The same kind of data?
What we would not, but I'm certain that we could work with our friends at the Higher Education Commission to pull that and send that your way.
Chairman?
If you could get that information and disseminate it to our chairman, I'd really appreciate that. The other thing is the completion grants.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's some people out there kind of wondering, why are we helping kids buy groceries and keep their cars running? Can you briefly talk about why that is so important for being able to complete college?
Absolutely. So what we know, and I appreciate that question, Chairman, over the years, what we know is that very small amounts of money will lead a student to walk totally away from college because they're having to work more hours in an effort to pay that off. What we also know is students lack transportation. They can't, for example, put gas into their cars to get to school. Students are not buying their books. And what we know about that is if they're not buying their books, they can't be successful in their classes. And if they're not successful in their classes, they're dropping out of college. And so what we've really tried to do is create a fund that students can come working with their coach to identify exactly what's preventing them from being successful and providing those funds, I will say, in small increments of about $100 each request in an effort to eliminate these additional non-academic, non-tuition barriers.
Last one.
Yes, sir, Chairman.
Last question is, and just for clarification, this is a public-private public-private partnership. There is private investment into this program too, correct?
Yes, thank you so much for that. Yes, we raise funds privately every year because we are a separate nonprofit. The state provides us with some funding, but we are still very much privately fundraising.
Thank you. Keep it good work.
Thank you very much. Good line of question. Correct me if my figures are wrong. Before the completion grant, are young people going through the Tennessee Promise without that? In your second year is about 32%. We'll lose only about 32%, we move on. But with the completion grant, where we had all this in place to what we're trying to do, it goes up to around 84%. Is that correct?
Yes. So what we know is that if a student has a coach and a completion grant, their likelihood of graduating from college increases by 183%. And so that is the Knox number. So we started this, to Chairman Sapicki's point. This idea started with private funds in Knox County, and we brought this to the state to say, these are the numbers that we're seeing in Knoxville. Can we take this statewide? We just received numbers from the University of Tennessee that the statewide effort is showing a 13 percentage point jump in first year retention. So again, just this dramatic increase in the ability for the student to stay.
Excellent. Members, anyone else like to address a question to our guest, Tennessee Achieves? While we have them here, Representative Parkinson?
No, I don't have a question, just more of a comment. Thank you for what you all are doing, and I appreciate, your steady growth and push for what is a very distinct and a very distinct mission. And you guys have definitely have there's a need for what you're doing, and you're filling an incredible void. I truly appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you.
Thank you. And one last comment from me. You said y'all were down at Dallas.
Yes.
Let's have a little bit of bragging going on. When I go around the country and visit other states, Tennessee gets a lot of credit for a lot of things we're doing. What did y'all hear?
Oh, everybody wants to be us, honestly, on so many different levels, but specifically the work that's happening in education. We are the envy of the country.
That's good news. Thank you. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate your time, and anything we can do to help move forward, let us know.
Thank you all so much.
Okay. Members, we're now back in session. We do have a calendar to work on. We're going to move to item number 1. Let me go over the calendar with you. Well, we'll just go over the calendar as we go through. Item number 1, House Bill 2059 by Chairman Tim Hicks. You have a motion and a second, sir. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I have an amendment on the bill that makes the bill.
You have it 13764.
That's it.
Does that rewrite the bill?
It does.
It does rewrite the bill. Okay, members, any objection to adding that to the bill so we can have proper discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adding Amendment 13764 to House Bill 2059 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended. Please explain what we're doing.
Thank you, Chairman. As amended, House Bill 2059 increases the number of available credit hours for work-based learning programs from a maximum of 3 to a maximum of 6. The amendment also clarifies that a minimum of 5 hours a week of supervised work experience are needed for each credit. This means that if a student were to take 3 credits in the fall semester and 3 hours in the spring, they would have a minimum of 15 hours of on-site work each week. So that sort of just clarifies, and I think the departments was happy with the way that this amendment rewrote the bill.
And that's why we went from 10 to 5 to correct that. Is that correct? 10 hours to 5 hours?
Yes, Chairman. Yes.
Okay. Members, that explanation, questions to our sponsor. Question's been called. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2059 out to calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, sir. Item number 2, House Bill 1697 by Representative Stevens. You have a motion and a second, and I believe you also have an amendment that you would like to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have decided to move forward without the amendment.
Okay, so we are not going to move forward with 13630.
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay, you do have a motion and a second on your bill. You may explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill originated with our Rutherford County School Board and the reading specialist. Chairman White came down this summer to visit and go over our learning camps to see what worked and ways to make improvements. And one of the things that the reading specialist suggested was to eliminate the first test at the reading camps, the learning camps, because they said that that was wasting time that could have been used for instruction instead of taking a test. So the students in third grade especially have just taken the TCAP test. And if they're in the summer learning camp, they failed it twice. And on the first day of the summer learning camp, they're taking a test again. And then they're taking another test at the end of the learning camp. So the thinking was if we get rid of that first test, that'll save a day that they could use for instruction. And so that's what the bill does. It just eliminates the first test at the camps.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you. Just to clarify, for the record, we are eliminating a test in Tennessee.
You recognize.
If this bill passes, yes.
Keep hope alive.
Okay. Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a great point in the fact that we do rely on tests, and we test, and we test. And that's, I guess, my concern with this particular one, in that this is early in the process of our third graders being tested. And as I said earlier, two things. One, we're going to have to teach our kids how to test and how to prepare for a test. So I think this is a good opening salvo to a summer of learning where you're going to be tested, and it's going to mean a whole lot at the end. So that's one piece, but also there's a span of time between the end of the school year test and this summer bridge camp test, and these are new learners. Something may have clicked with them, and they may be able to test a little better. But I would say more importantly, it's data. If we're going to test, that's why we test. We want data. We want to pick up that data. What better way to see what this summer reading camp has done than to do a pre-test and a post-test? That should give you an accurate measure of how this student improved. Lack of that test, they did bad in the early. Well, it may not have been a bad test, might have been a bad day. So this to me gives us a specific way of measuring. We're spending significant funds. So why wouldn't we want a pre-test to measure how well that bridge program has done? I get teachers don't want to do it, but it might be a good thing to measure that before and after.
Representative Stevens, would you like to address the comment by Representative McKenzie?
Oh, sure. The purpose of the pre-test was to evaluate the success of the summer camps. I think last year we saw that they are very successful. And the department says there's plenty of other data points they can use to measure to see if the students did learn during the camps.
Representative McKenzie, follow up.
Yeah, just quick. That's one of my. You can't take 1 year. You can't. No scientific, no statistical measure takes 1 year and makes a concrete conclusion. And that's what we're doing by passing this law. We're taking 1 year's worth of data and said, "Oh, you don't need that." That's not the way you gauge such an important thing as third grade retention. Again, I voted for it, but I voted for it for reasons. And the reasons are we're pouring a lot of resources in, and we're taking data to see what those resources are how effective they're being done. So to say we're going to take 1 year, it didn't make any sense to take a test in June of 2023. So pre-tests are no longer any good. And that's what we're saying. That's a mistake. That's a mistake.
Thank you. Good discussion. I saw your bill a little bit different. When you come out of your third grade and you're going to have to go to summer school, we were testing to see where you stood so we could see where you end up in summer school. So really coming out where you already know you're in summer school, let's just test you then and make sure that you've improved. I was interpreting it like that. Am I off base, Representative Reverend Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe you are correct. This was just a measure to see if the student has learned during the summer camp to improve off of what they scored on their
Oh,
TCAP
man.
test.
Okay, Chairman Haston, you have an input?
Thank you. Yeah, the question kind of goes back to the amendment. I know we're not on the amendment, so I might be in trouble here with the chairman. But the one thing about the data point you mentioned about making sure we already have a data point with the latest TCAP. The one thing that I did like about the amendment was that, you know, the first and second graders don't have the TCAP to point back to. And I thought that was what was getting at with the amendment, was being able to create a data point there for them at least. But I may have that incorrect, but I just was wanting to get a little bit more detail on the reason why we didn't go with the amendment.
Representative Stevenson, would you address that?
Sure. So the amendment came from SCORE. They suggested that maybe the K through 2 students should take that pre-test so they can evaluate the success of a summer learning camp. And after consulting with the Department of Education, they felt like the screeners that are offered K through 2 are a good place that they can use to measure that data.
Chairman Haston. Chairman Sapicki. Okay, let's go to Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, if you could, for those who are here and those who are watching, give us, as best you can, the timeline between the test that the child may take before the summer camp process starts, the test they may take while they're in school. So I think there's some concern about the child maybe having taken a test while in school and then one in the summer camp time period. So can you help us with that timeline?
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure the exact dates, but the TCAP test is offered at the end of the school year. And of course, if the student doesn't score well enough, they take it again. And then they enter a summer learning camp shortly after that. I think those are in June, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a short window of time there. And I don't know when the screeners are offered during the year, but my assumption would be it would probably be near the end of the year so they could see if their school year was successful.
Representative Love.
And I'm going to tell my age here, Mr. Chairman, but we used to ask the question if there was someone from the department here. I don't know if we still.
Well, good question. We don't have anybody down to speak. And of course, our rules, they had to request in advance.
Okay, I guess I have told my age. But this is one of the situations, I think, when we have an opportunity for clarity, so we know what we're dealing with when the screeners are given. What is that time difference between the end of school and the start of the summer camp? Does the camp have to start in June? Can it start in July? All these things. I think we're all concerned about making sure that the child has a benchmark upon which to look so that the camp can be designed around getting that child to a certain place so the post-test reflects some growth and some achievement. So I think I know it's what my colleague from Knoxville was trying to get at, and I'm interested in it also. So since there's no one from the department here, maybe out the rules, Mr. Chairman, I was still fishing as I filibustered that you might go ahead and call them up. But
I will do that. From what I do know, the end of course test, of course, is given in third grade. It's not given in first and second. And then, of course, test usually comes around April in each of the school years, if I'm not mistaken. So we probably just got that little bit of a gap between the end of course third grade test and then get those. And that's been one of the issues, getting the test scores back, so we would know, which children were in the summer camps and things. Does that suffice, or I can work on a more complete answer?
That was very helpful, I think, which gets to my point, Mr. Chairman, that there may be a lot of time between that screener and when the child starts the summer camp. And if there was an amendment that maybe fixed that, I thought that there may be some conversation about the applicable nature of it.
Okay. Chairman Sapicki.
So trying to talk this through. Before the TCAP test, they'll take a benchmark. So you have a benchmark, then you'll have a TCAP, and the testing window is usually mid-April through first part of May. Then students who don't do well on the TCAP can now, a week later, take another retake. to show that they're on track. If I understand after that, when they go into summer school, they take another pre-test. And then at the end of summer school, they take a final test to be able to show the growth. I believe this bill is eliminating the pre-test that they take when they enter summer school, and we'll be relying on the data from the TCAP and the retake to be able to show the growth of the student when they exit. So what we're doing is, if I understand right, we are eliminating the pre-test starting with summer school to gain teaching time during summer school.
That is, as I understand it.
That's the way I understand it. And we could probably ask the sponsor of the bill if all that is correct.
Would you like to weigh in, Representative Stevens?
That is my understanding, and we're just trying to make it a little bit less testing and a little more instruction time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we do have a literacy test in third grade, three benchmarks, 3 times a year, plus the end of course. But what his bill is specifically dealing with is that pre-test as you go into the summer school. Thinking that it's duplicative, having had 3 tests, plus your TCAP, we know where you are in your reading proficiency, that you're going into summer school. Then we test you at the end of summer school to make sure that you, which is one of the conditions to moving on to 4th grade. Legal says she can intervene on that. Without objection, we're in recess.
Casey Washburn, Office of Legal Services. Representative Love, to your point, there are student grade levels that are eligible to attend the summer learning camps that are not tested under the TCAP. They're not mandatory tested. So if a district chooses to implement a test in 2nd grade, they may have that data. But for some of the camps, it's students that will be entering kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. So those students would not have taken a TCAP prior to being enrolled in the summer camp.
Chairman Speaker, we were still on you or anymore? Representative Love, you can have a follow-up. I think we're on your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so if I understand what legal said, then there are students who fall out of the testing requirement, who if the amendment.
Are you still talking to legal?
Yes, sir. I was just trying to
Yeah,
talk in.
I just want to make sure we didn't go back in for
Yes, sir.
recess.
And the amendment that wasn't put on, would that address those students who are not in that TCAP testing window?
Let me see if we can get you an answer on that. 1 second.
Representative Love, Casey Washburn, Legal Services. I believe the amendment would remove the requirement for the pre-test if the TCAP score for that student is available. So if that student did not have a TCAP score, then they would have to be administered the pre-test at the start of the camp.
So 3rd grade, not the 2nd, 1st. Correct? Because there's not a TCAP test.
Yeah, so the amendment language would require students to be administered a pre-test at the beginning of the after-school learning mini camp each year unless the student's score on the most recently administered TCAP is available.
Chairman Love?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in that instance, if they don't have a TCAP score, then they have to take the pretest?
That is correct, under the language of the amendment.
Okay, so that would apply to grades 1 and 2.
It would be any student that
student.
gets enrolled to the summer
Okay.
camps that does not have a TCAP score.
Gotcha. So it would get those students, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
So it would get those students who don't have a TCAP score, which may include students in grades 1 and 2.
That's correct. If they don't have a TCAP score, then they would have to be administered the pretest to see where they are at the start of the camp.
Okay. Thank you, legal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions back to legal? Chairman Haston?
But that is the amendment that did not go on.
That is correct, Chairman
Okay.
Haston.
So I think the issue before us is the amendment. If we, moving forward, if we as a committee feel more comfortable with the amendment or without the amendment, or if we think we need more data to make a good decision. We're back in session. Chairman Werner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stevens, did you work with the department on this bill prior?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill was drafted after consultation with our school board, and then before our last meeting, school board asked us to amend it. And then school board has worked with the Department of Education, and they said that, either way is fine, but they would be probably more complicated if the amendment passed. So the decision was made to move forward with it.
And
as
the
it was
department's,
originally.
department's okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
I think they're okay with either way, but they thought that the way it was worded originally would be less complicated.
Representative Butler, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Call previous question.
So we have had the previous question called for. Any objection to that question? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 1697 out of finance indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. If you'd like to be registered as a no, it went into finance. Good discussion, committee. Thank you. That's what we're here for. Item number 3, House Bill 1923, Representative Butler. You have a motion and a second on your bill. I do not see any amendment. So you recognize, explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This bill is fairly simple. We have students that are in dual enrolled at high school at many TCATs across the state, and we are, as a state, investing money into those students as they take those dual enrollment classes. And so what this legislation does is it prioritizes our dual enrolled students to the top of the list if there's a waiting list. In some cases, we don't have a waiting list, but in the cases where we do, these dual enrolled students would be put to the very top of those waiting lists because we have already invested state resources and state dollars into these dual enrolled high school students. So that's really all the bill does. So with that, I'll renew my motion and take any questions.
Questions of Representative Butler on the language of the bill? Chairman Slater.
Thank you. And thank you, Representative Butler, for bringing the bill. And I'm going to vote in support of the bill. I would just emphasize that we do have some waiting list at some TCATs. We've been investing in our TCATs, and hopefully that investment is going to open up more spaces. One of my concerns as we carve out this specific place on the list for our duly enrolled high school students is that they may end up taking some of the spots that would be there for retooling adults. And though, it's kind of a this or that type of a situation, I would just encourage our committee to continue to look at reducing the number of TCATs that have waiting list. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Would you like to respond, Representative?
Thank you for those comments. We've had a significant investment in TCATs across the state, as we all are aware, which is going to help reduce some of those waiting lists. And we further move down where freshmen can now do CTE and some of the dual enrollment classes. So as we continue to allow students to start this program early, I think it's even more critical that we allow them to continue, whether it's through the summer or the fall semester, whatever the case may be. And to address the adult students, it is an unfortunate circumstance, I guess, of this legislation. However, we have invested thousands and thousands of dollars already in that high school student, regardless of the class that they're in. So I feel like as a state and as a good steward of our resources, we're protecting our investment by allowing those students to be prioritized. And it may, in some cases, push an adult student down a spot or two, but we need to allow our high school students to continue that education. Thank you.
Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you. And I like the idea of this. The only question I have for you is in section 1, number 2 on the bill, if you scroll down where it says a TCAT may establish a deadline. should we not, to make sure that spot's there, what if a TCAP says, well, we're not going to, you know what I'm saying? Can you address that? Clean that up a little bit?
Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We, in working with TBR to try to establish this, the TCATs that don't have a waiting list, it may not be as critical to establish a deadline. And what that's talking about is, let's say, I'm just going to use it as an example, that most of our high school students are going to graduate end of May. And that TCAT class for the summer, let's say it starts in June, just for illustration purposes. We need to have a cutoff sometime possibly at 1st of April. So if that high school student doesn't choose to take that we can fill that slot with an adult student or another student that's coming in there. And so I don't think it would be fair to hold that slot till June 1st if we're not going to have somebody take the slot. Let's fill it with another student. I don't want to waste the class space. Let's maximize every class that we can. So I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that student to say, hey, I'm going to take that slot June 1st, and the cutoff is April 1st or April 15th. So I've left some flexibility for the individual TCATs to do that, because in some cases there won't be a need for that. In some cases we have TCATs that have waiting lists that are long. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, sponsor. Support the bill. You just mentioned as far as for having wasted spaces. Obviously, if we've got instruction taking place, that's something where we need all the seats filled. Do we know, out of the different programs that are out there, how many empty slots that we're currently seeing because of that particular situation?
Sorry, Representative Ritchie. You're recognized, Representative Butler.
I do not have the number of seats, and there is some flexibility within the TBR and the TCAT system to move programs around to maximize the seats. And I would have to rely on THEC to help me answer that question, or TBR as well. So I don't have an answer to the number of seats that are not being utilized. I can speak to the TCAT that's in Livingston, where I have 2 children going to, and they have removed a program that was not being utilized to put another program that's being utilized. So that's the good thing about the TCATs. They have the ability and the flexibility to remove a program if it's not being utilized, to put another program that will be. Thank you. With that, I renew my motion.
Thank you. And the good news is Governor and the General Assembly added $1 billion new dollars to our TCAT statewide programs last year to expand our existing and build new ones. So we're addressing these issues as we move forward. Okay, members, anyone else have a question to Representative Butler?
I renew my motion.
Question's been called. Any objection? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 1923 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That moves out, sir.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. As we move on to House Bill 1631, I meant to mention this a while ago. Thank you, Rutherford School Board, on that last bill. One thing, we do work year round, and so we get a lot of our answers made when we go around the state visiting our school. So thank you all for bringing that to our attention, and so appreciate that very much. Members, we're now on House Bill 1631. Representative Balso, you're recognized.
Second.
You have a motion and second. You may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. This bill that we have before us, HB 1631, will look familiar to many of you because this committee passed this identical bill in August, but it was not obviously taken up by the Senate during the special session, so it would never became enacted into law. The bill simply does one thing. Under current law, private schools K through 12 have the ability to develop their own firearms policy. This legislation, if passed, will change the language of 49-50-803 to make it clear that private schools pre-K through 12 also have the ability to develop their own firearms policies. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, members, with that explanation, no amendments, any questions of this particular bill? I see none. We do have Representative Love.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor. So just for clarity, currently, public schools pre-K through 12 can develop, or is it just K through 12?
Representative Balso.
My question was public schools. I said, in public schools, to
Thank-
to the sponsor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Love, I believe that under current law 39-17-1309, public schools do not have the ability to develop their own firearms policy, but rather this body, acting as the elected representatives of the people, have developed a firearms policy for public schools K through 12 all across the state.
Representative Love,
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
further questions? Thank you, Chairman Reagan. Question's been called. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 1631 out to county rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? It does move out. Item number 5, I will request we move that roll that 2 spaces, and we'll come back to it. And we're going to go to House Bill 1908 by Representative Bosso. You're recognized. You do have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we also have an amendment that does not make the bill, but that we would like to add onto the bill.
And the amendment number is 13771.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay, we have a motion for you to explain the amendment, and then we would consider adopting the amendment. Do you have a second on that? Okay. Representative Bosso, explain your amendment that does not rewrite the bill, what it does.
The amendment makes it clear that the Department of Education will not select a school to receive a therapy dog unless the school wants to and agrees to accept the therapy dog.
You have a motion second to adopt. Any objection to that? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving, adding amendment 13771 to House Bill 1908 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended. You may begin to explain the bill, Representative Bosso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this bill, if adopted, will inaugurate a pilot program pursuant to which 5 public schools across the state, at least one of which would be in each Grand Division, will receive a therapy dog in order to assist students who may have emotional issues, including anxiety, depression, or other issues, as well as be a benefit to the entire student population of the schools that receive the dog. In my home county of Williamson County, we've had excellent experience with a therapy dog named Bolo that is based at one of our local elementary schools, Edmondson Elementary School, but the dog roams around to other schools with its handler, Sergeant Jacob Marley of the Williamson County Sheriff's Department. And both the deputy sheriff and Bolo have received rave reviews. And I also understand, although I do not have firsthand knowledge of it, that metropolitan schools here in Nashville, Davidson County have a therapy dog by the name of Sergeant Bo, who's also doing some very good work. This would simply be a 12-month pilot program at a modest cost of $50,000 to place 5 therapy dogs across the state to see what benefit those dogs may be able to bring to students who, for one reason or another, might be able to benefit from the presence of those dogs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Bosso. We have Representative Gillespie has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the sponsor, thank you. I think this could really help with, I've been fighting for a good bit with our problem with ACEs in our schools, especially where I live. And I'd love to see one of these dogs in Shelby County. So if we can advocate for that after hopefully we pass that, we could be one of the recipients. So thank you.
Representative Bosso, did you have a comment?
No, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Gillespie.
Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to address on this bill? Motion's been called for on the bill. Any objection? All those in favor of moving House Bill 1908 out to Finance, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out to Finance. Item number 7, House Bill 1789 by Vice Chairman Slater. You are recognized. You have a motion and a second. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Last year, we passed legislation that helps keep criminals out of classrooms. HB 1789 builds on that work. Currently, if a licensed educator is convicted of certain crimes, that individual is subject to automatic revocation of their educator license. But if the individual pleads guilty or nolo contendere, it is unclear in statute whether the individual is subject to potential license discipline. House Bill 1789 ensures that educators who plead guilty or no contest to offenses under judicial diversion cannot avoid accountability for that plea during the period of time they are under judicial diversion. And with that, I stand ready for questions.
That explanation, committee. Questions, comments to the sponsor? Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 1789 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. That now brings us back to, excuse me, item number 5, House Bill 1605. Representative Bolso, before I recognize you, let me just make a comment as chairman, committee, and members of our audience. We are a representative government. We do address things that have to come before us. This bill was a little contentious in subcommittee, and here we would discuss the bill, but we would respect each other's right to have their own opinion or their own belief. And you may hold your signs, just don't block people behind you. With having said that, then we will have a proper discussion. We've got a couple of guests, Tennesseans, who have asked to come speak, and we will respect that. So we're on House Bill 1605 by Representative Bolso. You are recognized. You have a motion and a second on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also have an amendment that I'd like to put on the bill as well.
This amendment, members, does rewrite the bill. Would you like an explanation? Or would you like to add it to the bill for proper discussion? Amendment number 13663.
Motion.
One second. You have. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I don't have any amendment here. So yes, I would like that amendment discussed. It must come in. a little
You
later.
don't have the amendment before you, 13663. It rewrites the bill. We're going to discuss it anyway. Is your.
Yes, could you discuss the bill before we vote on the amendment before we vote on it?
Members, you have any objection to the member's request? Okay, without that, having said that, Representative Bolso, would you describe the amendment before we vote?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to do that. This amendment 13663 simply does two things. In subsection C1 of the proposed legislation, it changes, quote, employees, agents, or representatives, close quote, simply to, quote, employees or agents, close quote. And that was done for the sake of clarity. And then in section C4 of the bill, it makes a slight revision to the definition of the word display. Previously in subcommittee, a display was defined to be exhibit, where, or place anywhere students may see the object. In the amendment, the word where has been deleted. Those are the two changes, Mr. Chairman.
With that explanation, we have a motion to adopt the amendment for further discussion. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving Amendment 13663 to House Bill 1605 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, your bill is properly amended. You're recognized, Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this bill as amended, House Bill 1605, really addresses one issue, which is whether parents should be the ones who decide what values their children are exposed to when they go to school. Prior to filing this bill, I received complaints from parents in my county and in other counties about the presence of different political flags in classrooms across the state. What this bill does is to define specifically what flags are allowed to be in our public schools so that parents remain the ones in charge of determining what values their children are going to learn. That is, in summary, the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, am I correct, Representative Bolso, that the amendment we added takes your legislation back to where it originally was when you first presented it? Is that a correct statement?
If I might inquire, Mr. Chairman, when we first presented it in subcommittee,
Yes, the very first one where you had amendment. We've gone through amendment 1 and 2. Now this amendment 3 rewrites the bill.
I mean, what we're looking at right now differs in a number of respects from the bill as it was originally presented in subcommittee. After it was first presented in subcommittee, we made a number of amendments to address questions and concerns that came up in the committee hearing. Once the bill was passed, just a few days ago, we made those 2 further amendments that I mentioned just a moment ago. So what we're looking at now is different, both from the way it was originally presented in the subcommittee and in the way it was approved by the subcommittee.
Okay, before we have some testimony from our guest members, I'm going to open it up to any questions of the sponsor at this point in time. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor, looking at the amendment, does this bill prohibit teachers from displaying a flag of a college or university in the classroom?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it does not, Representative Love.
Representative Love.
So for clarity, where is it allowed in here? Because I look at universities, I don't see them spelled out specific. I see United States, official Tennessee state flag.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see it.
Item I reads, quote, "a flag that represents
Okay.
a college or university,"
All
close
right.
quote. So it would be under that subdivision.
Thank you.
Representative Love, follow up.
Would a band flag, like the 2-time Grammy Award-winning Tennessee State University band, be allowed to display their band flag in the teacher's classroom?
Representative Bolso.
Yes, I would qualify that as a flag that represents a college or a university.
Okay.
Follow up.
Tennessee General Assembly flag.
Representative Bolso.
That's an interesting question, Representative Love. I think when you look at F, it refers to a flag that represents a city, county, metropolitan government, or other political subdivision of the state. I think one could reasonably read that to include a flag of the General Assembly.
Representative Love.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that clarity, but I might differ because the General Assembly is not a city or a county or a political subdivision or metropolitan government, if I'm correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fact is that obviously a Tennessee flag is allowed. The Tennessee government is divided into 3 branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. So I think one reasonably looking at the text of this bill would conclude that a flag that represents the General Assembly, the state judiciary, or the executive branch would be a Tennessee state flag that would be allowed.
Representative Love, legal can make a statement. They tell me they cannot give you an exact answer, but they can make a statement if you prefer that.
Yes, sir, that'd be fine.
Without objection, we're in recess. Legal, may I ask for your statement?
Casey Washburn, Office of Legal Services. With regard to subdivision C1F in Section 1, a flag that represents a city, county, metropolitan government, or other political subdivision of this state, the term political subdivision is not defined, so it would be given its plain meaning. So it would be ultimately a matter of interpretation as to whether that would constitute a political subdivision. But a court would probably look at other examples in state law as to what constitutes a political subdivision.
Representative Love, you have follow-up with legal?
Yes, sir. My concern would be that since there is a number of specific examples given, and since there is in number 3 under section 1, an allowance for a parent to bring a civil action, I think it's important for us to get clear definition of things like that. I'm not trying to belabor the point, but this is a very serious bill. And we're talking about specifically lining out what is allowed. I think that we need to have an understanding of what that means if we're talking about a flag and we don't have a definition for it. And we're saying that they can display, cannot display. So I would ask that we consider that in our deliberations, Mr. Chairman. That's the legal, but this, you said they can't give a clear definition, right?
Legal?
Representative Love, there's no defined term for political subdivision applicable to this particular piece of legislation, but read in the you'd have to just read it in the context it's used in the bill, and it would, if there's any question as to whether a flag would or would not fall within that category, it would ultimately be a determination by the school, the LEA or the public charter school, and then any subsequent, challenge or civil litigation that may be brought would decide that issue.
Representative Love?
Thank you, to legal, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bolso, and we'll come back to you before I go to another comment. Oh, 1 second. We still have a question while we're out of session. Chairman Sapicki.
Yes, for legal. Under section H, it talks about a flag that represents a country. Would that be the current flag of that country or a past flag of a country?
Legal, you're recognized.
There's no limitation or specification provided in the bill. So again, if it would be read to, if it could be read or interpreted to represent a country, then I believe, that would again be, if there's challenge or question as to the scope of that, that would be a facts determination.
Chairman Sapicki.
Mr. Chairman, I'm requesting a 2-minute recess.
Without objection, 2-minute recess. Okay, members, let's go back in session. In order.
Parkinson, put Parkinson on the list.
We are now back in session. We had some discussion on some technical aspects of the lingual language we were trying to get clarity on. I've got a couple of members who want to speak, and then I want, out of courtesy for our guest here, we do have a couple who want to, four who want to speak, so we make sure we get to that in just a moment. But Representative Warner, did you have a question on the bill?
Not yet, not on the bill. Mr. Chairman, I'm calling for a roll call vote on this.
Okay, any objection to a roll call vote? Are we? Let me text the clerk. I think it's the will of the committee, but there are steps through the process where we have a roll call vote that we have to request it. Okay, we've got three people. I thank everybody. We'll get a comment from the thing, but right now we will go forward with the roll call vote. Okay, Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Call for the question.
We have guests. Do you want to call the question? Question's been called. That's a non-debatable. Any objection to the question? Chairman Reagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the chair had previously announced we had guests speak in the procedures for our committee. I believe it's the guests get to speak before we vote.
Representative Parson?
I'm being bullied by my Democratic colleagues up here. I'm gonna withdraw my question.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Parson. Representative McKenzie, did you have a comment as we proceed?
I'd love to hear the speakers first.
Okay. Members, without objection, I'm going to call up to the tables. We have three who would like to speak in opposition to the bill and one in support. So if you come up and occupy four of the chairs up here, and I'm going to hold you to a tight 2 minutes. So William Petty. You're going to pass, Mr. Petty. Okay. Erica Bowden. Would you like to still speak? Lauren Shipman. And Macy Fluharty. Pronounce that correct. Okay. We are in recess. When you begin your comments, as I said, identify yourself for the AV streaming. Keep your comments to 2 minutes. And we will start out with Miss Erica Bolton. You're recognized.
Hi, my name is Erica Bowden, and I have a lot of questions that have come up about this bill and the damage it could do to Tennessee kids. Last week, the sponsor justified the legality of this bill by misinterpreting Garcetti versus Ceballos and failed to address that the recent Supreme Court ruling in Kennedy versus Bremerton profoundly reinforced that teachers do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of expression at school. The court ruled not everything in school can be subject to government control. Such an interpretation would allow a school to fire a Muslim teacher for wearing a headscarf or a Christian from praying quietly over their lunch. I want to make sure that this committee understands the implications of this bill. Last week, it was clarified this applies to teachers' jewelry, their coffee mugs, their tattoos. Where does this end? And does this apply to symbols that are not in the shape of a flag? What about a rainbow with the LGBT symbol in the shape of a circle? Or a Black Lives Matter mug, or a pride necklace? What about a pennant? And if a rainbow necklace is banned, what about a cross necklace? A pride flag in a classroom is not disrupted, but this law would be. These teachers are not indoctrinating. They are not giving LGBT lessons. They're not making children gay. This is already not allowed.
The only problem that exists are the few parents who don't want their kids exposed to people that are different than them. And this is virtually impossible in our schools. If your beliefs are firmly held, they should not be threatened by the beliefs of others. If the goal is to ban Pride or BLM or any other specific flag, this bill would do just the opposite. This bill is yet another signal on a long list that certain groups are not welcome in this state. And the more you push, the more these groups will resist, with more non-flag rainbows, posters, more signs, more pride. I know Tennessee to be beautifully diverse. If we want the American flag and the Tennessee flag to mean something, we cannot keep passing laws that exclude only certain groups.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. We will now go to Lauren Shipman. You are in, I'm sorry, Lauren Shipman Dorrance. You're recognized, ma'am.
American and a public school educator to urge you all to safeguard the right of all children to learn in safety. I have taught in public schools for 17 years, 11 here in Nashville. I hold 3 advanced degrees, including a master's degree from Vanderbilt and a doctorate from the Johns Hopkins School of Education, specializing in mind, brain, and teaching. You must oppose this bill because it will violate students' rights, it will impair their safety and therefore the efficacy of our learning environments, and most egregiously, it will jeopardize children's lives. I first worked with transgender students early in my career in Texas. Being a 20-something novice raised in a very religious and conservative household, I'm embarrassed to say that this was the first time I ever met a transgender person. Thankfully, I had a colleague who hosted a gay-straight alliance at our school, which I knew only because she had a pride flag on her door. Because of that flag, I was able to go to a veteran teacher and get valuable guidance to support that child in the way that she deserved. I learned how teachers play a vital role to keep children safe and ensure their equal access to education is unhindered by fear of discrimination, bullying, or violence. When a student sees a pride flag, they have instantaneous reassurance that they are not merely safe, but they are welcome, valued, and free to learn without fear. It puts would-be harassers on notice that intimidation, hate, and violence will not be tolerated. As you know, beyond its violations of the First and 14th Amendments, the Equal Access Act, this bill is also in conflict with direct recommendations made by state-mandated teacher training that aim to prevent suicide among children under Tennessee's Jason Flatt Act. This annual training describes how school connectedness, a construct of safety and belonging, is among the largest protective factors against suicide for all students. The training also states this data from a national survey of LGBTQ students. Having endured the horror of comforting children who have lost a classmate and friend while grappling with that loss myself, I implore you to act today to save children's lives.
Thank you for those comments very much. And then let's go to Macy Flaharty. You're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Macy Fluharty. I'm a Davidson County resident. This bill was born out of misinformation stemming from bigotry. The sponsor has shown us that by his claims on what the pride flag represents. People have used misinformation to stifle our community's lives for decades. LGBTQ plus people have been the subject of slurs, abuse, mass shootings, and now a barrage of discriminatory legislation. For weeks, parents and educators have pointed out the unfair treatment coming from this bill. The sponsor of this bill has not hidden his prejudice towards the marginalized community, and still we risk having teachers' expression and speech stifled through legislation again. Over these past years, this legislature has dedicated time to making sure school is not a safe place for all students. Bills have been passed allowing teachers to deny implicit bias training and to even bully their students. When a knowledgeable parent takes their child to school and sees the pride flag, they know that child will be treated with as much care and respect as any of their counterparts. When a child sees the pride flag, they are told they are accepted as themselves. Leaving a child at school isn't easy, especially nowadays in a state that protects discrimination and has irresponsible gun laws. Seeing a pride flag gives these parents some peace of mind. This bill takes that away from them and limits teachers' ability to decorate their classroom and consequently how they can speak to their students through an openly accepting environment. Our flag is not used to indoctrinate. They are used as a form of expression to share love, acceptance, and equality. Flag flying is a form of speech that this body is trying to legislate. Schools can create their own flag policy if they are concerned about this issue. It seems the purpose of this bill is to, again, stifle a marginalized community and hide us from students, which only does our children a disservice by leaving them unprepared for the real world. Before voting, I implore you to ask yourselves if this is why you ran for office, to pass blatantly discriminatory laws against marginalized constituents based on bigoted misinformation. Tennesseans deserve better than this dangerous abuse of power. Please vote no.
Thank you very much, Ms.
you.
Flaherty. Members, while we're in recess, does any member have a question you'd like to ask of our guests? Thank you very much. Appreciate y'all's taking the time to come here today and express your concerns to this committee. We're back in session. Chairman Sapicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask a clarifying question to the sponsor of this bill?
You may, Representative Boso, Chairman Sapicki.
So here's the question is, in Section H of the bill, it talks about a flag that represents a country and not, I just want some clarifying. A statement is the intent is that represents a country at its current time being flown.
Representative Boso?
Yes, that is the intent.
Thank you.
Chairman Warner, excuse me, Chairman Warner.
Question on the bill.
Point of order, point of order.
Question has been called on the bill, but I'll recognize the point of order, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prior to the speaker speaking, you asked me, was I ready? I said I would like to go after the speakers. And then you went to recognize two other people in front of me. Additionally, Representative Love had the floor when you called a 2-minute recess. It should have gone back to him.
Okay,
So that
well,
is the order that I'm questioning.
Okay, well, I'm going by the list up here. You got to get the attention of the peer. There's a lot going on.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, you called my name and recognized me.
Keep things in order. Representative Warner, let me recognize Representative McKenzie. He is right. I was just told that his name is scratched out, but it is on there. I want to recognize Representative McKenzie, and then I will come back to Representative Warner.
I know you said a flag in your preamble. You used the word specifically what flags, and use the same word in subcommittee. This bill was clarified to lay out specifically what flags may fly. I just heard you say that, in your opinion, represents a country. You're saying, in your opinion, that means a current country. So that's my question. But if you're trying to get around something, 1C says a flag that cannot be disturbed, altered, pursuant to Article 4-1-412. So that says, except as otherwise provided in this section, no memorial regarding historic conflict, historic entity, historic event, historic figure, or historic organization that is located on public property may be removed, renamed, relocated. So that's the article that you're referring to. So my question is, per that article, can we fly the Confederate flag per this piece of legislation?
Representative Boso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, with regard to subsection H, I simply answered Chairman Sapicki's question about the intent. It was not an opinion that I gave, just a question about the intent. With regard to subsection C, I'll note that is a more specific provision than is subsection H. So under typical rules of statutory construction, that rule will apply to a flag if it is a flag that falls within the confines of subsection C, it being the more specific provision. In answer to your specific question, Representative McKenzie, we'd have to look at exactly what flags are accounted for under section 4-1-412. But I can tell you that under existing law already, without this bill, whatever flags are allowed to be displayed pursuant to that section are not, is not in no way going to be altered by this bill passing or not passing. Whatever flags, Confederate or otherwise, can be flown under 4-1-412 is already in the law, and this bill is not going to change that one bit either way.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go out of session so I could speak with legal.
Without objection, we're out of session. Legal, you're recognized.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. As it relates to the conversation you've just heard, is it true that a flag that represents a country or political subdivision only means flags that exist today? As an example, could the Confederate flag fly under this bill, and could the 48 state U.S. flag fly?
Legal, you're recognized.
Anastasia Campbell, Director of the Office of Legal Services. If we're speaking regarding the language in Section 1, Subdivision C 1F, the language states a flag that represents a city, county, metropolitan government, or other political subdivision of this state. I think that it would maybe a question of interpretation, although that's drafted in present tense. A court might be called upon to decide that, but you're also able to clarify in the language if the committee so chooses.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you. So I think I hear you crystal clear in that it's extremely unclear and that we're going to spend potentially millions of dollars litigating this if it passes. So my second question is, as it relates to 1C, and that's Section 1, could we, the way I read it, and I think I read it straight from the code, could the Nazi flag be included in this discussion, as that was a historic conflict?
You recognize Representative Bozo. Oh, I'm sorry,
No, that was legal.
legal. We're talking to legal. President McKenzie, she's checking.
Representative Harris, can you repeat the question?
Representative McKenzie.
Harris McKenzie.
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
You're recognized.
Thank you. My question is, and you can pick, per 1C, per 1H, I'll be specific, per 1C and or per 1H, can we fly, if this bill passes, can teachers fly a Nazi flag, put that on display in their classroom?
Legal.
I think that would be a question for a court to decide.
No.
Representative McKenzie.
As it relates to the words that are listed here, it says a flag that represents a country or political subdivision. As it relates to the 1C, it talked about historic flags and historic conflicts.
One moment.
So my question is,
let him, then I'll come to you.
I will ask again. I mean, we could go down the pike. What, North Korea, Russia, Palestine.
Okay.
These are flags that fall under these articles.
Okay, Representative Kinsey, I got a
So
point of.
that's a question.
Okay, so you have a point of order while we're out of session?
Yes, I got 2 points on it. First one was, when I went through the question, was allow Representative McKenzie to ask the question to this body, not to go out of session to legal. Second, I guess my point of order now is he addressing us or is he addressing legal with his statement that he's making now?
Representative McKenzie, are you addressing legal? Or are you addressing us? You're making some comments that.
No, I'm sorry. So that was a clear question to legal. It wasn't a comment. It gave examples to legal to answer my question. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on legal? Chairman Reagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for legal to
Reagan, then you.
address that question, I would also like to point out TCA 49-6-1019, specifically subparagraph J prohibits division, that which promotes division between or resentment of a race, sex, religion, creed, or nonviolent political affiliation, social class, or class of people. The same section also identifies visual aids, which displaying a flag qualifies as in the same category. So for the legal, the question is, would not this guidance, which is already in TCA, prohibit the flying of those divisive symbols?
Legal, you are recognized.
It would seem such, but I'm not going to get into hypotheticals and answer fact questions. I can only speak to the plain language of the statute, and I'm not going to be able to answer questions that would be resolved by a court. I can only speak to the plain language of the statute.
Okay, recognize Representative Parson, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're still out of session.
Right,
with
yes,
legal.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, my colleague had asked legal, does the legislation bar anybody from displaying Nazi flags or Korean flags or Palestinian flags? And legal didn't get a chance to answer the question because you went to my colleague on from Oak Ridge. And so I was trying to get an answer, that I was trying to hear the answer to my colleague's question. Does this legislation ban or stop anyone from displaying a Nazi flag or a Palestinian flag or a North Korean flag or a Russian flag? And we never got that answer.
Well, I heard the answer and I let her restate it. She said she cannot give you an answer. Legal, one more time.
Many of these questions are fact questions. This is a statute that gives someone a cause of action to sue and standing to sue. There will be many fact questions. I can only answer based on the plain language of the statute. I can't get into factual disputes on all the various iterations of flags and what would happen. I'm only able to speak to the plain language of the statute.
You want to follow up, Representative Parson?
Yes, sir. Just to be clear to legal, and I understand what you're saying, but the question wasn't based on factual. It was just asking, does the legislation prevent anyone from displaying these flags? That's a fact, whether the legislation does prevent or does not prevent them from displaying them. That's the answer we were trying to get.
Understand. I think legal, do you want one more comment?
Whether a particular flag falls within one of the categories identified in the subdivisions would be a question of fact involving historical and other issues that I'm not able to answer at this time, but I'm happy to put additional research into it.
Anybody have a question with legal? Chairman Haston?
Just one quick point. Of all the hypotheticals, and this is illegal, of all the hypotheticals, whether this bill passes or doesn't pass, those hypotheticals would still apply to the current law as it is, or if the bill passed as it is. So either way, you're running into those situations, whether we're currently in those and those flags are flown, or if this bill passed and those flags were flown. Would that be correct?
Legal. I can't answer. Chairman Haston, legal doesn't feel like they can address that. Okay. I will go to Representative Boso, then I'm coming back to Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is also a question.
We're still out of session.
Yes,
Legal?
this is a
Okay.
question for legal. My question is, would legal agree with me that this legislation does not prevent any LEA, that is any local school board, from prohibiting the display of any offensive flags.
Legal, would you like to address that?
The legislation as drafted is shall not. It identifies, it says that no, shall not display or permit any employees or agents to display a flag other than the ones identified. The ones identified are exceptions to the prohibition.
Okay. Any further question to legal? One last question from Representative Parkinson. You're recognized.
This came about because of legal's answer just now. Except for the ones identified. And can you tell us and those that are watching and listening, what are the ones identified?
Legal, would you like to address?
I'll be reading from the plain language of the Amendment 13663. The United States flag, the official Tennessee state flag, a flag that cannot be distributed or altered pursuant to 4-1-412, the POW MIA flag, a flag that represents an Indian tribe as defined in 25 USC section 5304, a flag that represents a city, county, metropolitan government, or other political subdivision of this state, a flag that represents any unit, branch, or other division of the armed forces, including but not limited to an ROTC program, a flag that represents a country or political subdivision thereof, a flag that represents a college or university, a flag that is displayed temporarily as part of a bona fide course curriculum, an official school flag, or the flag of an organization duly authorized to use a public school building, provided that the flag of an organization duly authorized to use a public school building may only be displayed at the time and place that the organization is authorized to use the school property.
Thank
President Parkinson?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you for that legal in 4-1 that describes the historic flags, which in historic battles. And then the one section that you read through also said about countries, which could mean that a Nazi flag is allowed. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any further question of legal? Okay, we're back in session. Representative Warner, you've been respectful to my wishes. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move question on the bill.
Question's been called on the bill. Is there any objection to the question being called? A roll call vote was asked for, and we will recognize that. So would the clerk please call the roll?
Representatives Baum. Yes. Baum votes yes. Representative Bolso.
Yes.
Bolso votes yes. Representative Butler. Yes. Butler votes yes. Representative Sapicki. Sapicki votes yes. Representative Fritz. Representative Gant. Representative Gillespie. No. Gillespie votes no. Representative Haston. Yes. Haston votes yes. Representative Hurt. Yes. Hurt votes yes. Representative Lafferty. Aye. Lafferty votes yes. Representative Love. No. Love votes no. Representative McKenzie.
No.
McKenzie votes no. Representative Parkinson.
No.
Parkinson votes no. Representative Reagan. Aye. Reagan votes yes. Representative Ritchie. Aye. Ritchie votes yes. Representative Stevens. Yes. Stevens votes yes. Representative Warner. Yes. Warner votes yes. Vice Chairman Slater.
Yes.
Slater votes yes. Chairman White.
Pass.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 noes, 12 ayes, and 1 present not voting.
The House Bill 1605 moves out of calendar and rules. We have a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned.